The difference between a good life and a bad life is how well you walk through the fire. Carl Jung. It always feels genuine at first, the way she looks at you, as if she sees something meaningful, something worth believing in. But then you start to wonder, is she really seeing you, or just the idea of you, a version she built in her own mind? You tell yourself it's love, but part of you senses something's off. You feel admired but not known, desired but not understood. And that quiet doubt, that's where the truth begins. You felt it. When her words say you're perfect, but your gut tells you she doesn't even know your flaws. When you feel like you're performing, even in moments that should be intimate. And then, eventually, the pressure sets in. You're no longer just yourself. You're the man she hopes you'll become. Or worse, the man she needs you to be so she doesn't have to face who she really is. Carl Jung saw this dynamic with unnerving clarity. He discovered that many women don't fall in love with men. They fall in love with projections, with fantasies born from their own unconscious. Jung called this the animus, the internal masculine image within every woman. When it's immature or unexamined, it becomes dominant, not just in her mind, but in her relationships. She stops relating to the man in front of her and starts relating to the role he's expected to fill. You might think you're being chosen, but what's really happening is selection by narrative. She already wrote the script, and if you fit the part, you're in, until you don't. Then the mask slips, the distance grows, and you're left wondering what changed. But nothing really changed. You just stopped playing a character she created and started becoming someone real. Jung didn't share this to make men bitter. He shared it so you could recognize what you're stepping into before it breaks you. Because once you understand the difference between being seen and being used as a screen, you stop trying to maintain illusions. You stop asking, what did I do wrong? And you start asking, when did I stop being her fantasy and start being myself? She didn't mean to do it. That's the part most men never understand. You want to believe there was some hidden cruelty in the way she changed, the way her warmth turned to silence, the way her admiration became distance. But the truth is darker and stranger. She wasn't pretending. She was possessed, not by spirits, by psychology. Jung called it a psychic infection. A woman whose animus, her internal masculine image, has not been brought into consciousness begins to live through it. She speaks with its voice, judges with its standards, argues with its righteousness, and loves not with her heart, but with a fantasy, one that she doesn't realize is even there. At first, it feels intense, almost magical. She seems certain of you, inspired by you, and part of you rises to meet it, wanting to be the man she sees. But over time, you notice something strange. She doesn't respond to your reality. She responds to your performance. When you act outside the version of you she holds in her mind, things get tense. When you contradict the narrative, she pulls away. It's like you're not allowed to change, not allowed to grow, not allowed to just be. That's not love, that's projection. And the danger, Jung warned, is that it works both ways, because the more she projects, the more you forget who you are. You start shaping yourself to fit her idea. You shrink certain parts of yourself. You exaggerate others, not because she asked you to, but because you're afraid of losing what never really saw you to begin with. This is what Jung meant by possession. She's not in a relationship with you. She's in a relationship with her own unconscious and using you as the stage. Most men never recognize this until it's too late. They blame themselves or they blame her. But blame solves nothing. Clarity does. Because once you understand that you were caught in someone else's inner war, you stop trying to fix the story. You walk off the stage, and for the first time, you start writing your own. At first, it was subtle, a shift in her tone, a pause in her affection. You told yourself it was nothing, stress, timing, maybe something you said, but the warmth didn't come back. The closeness began to slip through your fingers, and no matter how hard you tried to hold on, you felt her drifting. This is where most men spiral. You retrace every step, reread every message. You wonder if you should have done more or less or something different. But what you're really trying to do is save a role, not a relationship. Because by now, the fantasy she built around you has cracked. And when that happens, it's not repair she's looking for, it's replacement. Jung saw this pattern long before dating apps and modern romance. He wrote that once a projection collapses, the person behind it becomes unbearable. Not because of what they did, but because they shattered a dream. You didn't betray her. You just stopped being the character she cast. And because she never truly knew you, she has no interest in who's left once the illusion fades. This is the moment that breaks men. Not because they were rejected, but because they were never actually seen. You were never being loved. You were being used as a symbol. And symbols are disposable once their meaning no longer serves the narrative. So you try harder. You overcompensate. You sacrifice. And none of it works because it's not about what you're doing. It's about what you no longer represent. The moment you become real, flawed, human, unscripted, is the moment the illusion falls apart. That pain you feel, that confusion, it's not weakness, it's awakening. You're beginning to see that you were never the author of this connection. You were playing a role in someone else's dream. And now that the dream has ended, you have two options: chase another fantasy or begin the work Jung called individuation. The process of becoming real again. Not for her, not for anyone, but for yourself. This is where most men quit. Right here, after the illusion shatters, after the love turns cold, after the fantasy is gone and all that's left is silence. They tell themselves they just picked the wrong woman, that next time it'll be different, that all they need is to try harder, love better, fix themselves into something more appealing. But that's not healing, that's repetition. And Carl Jung warned, what you don't face in your own soul will return again and again as fate. You're not here to be chosen. You're not here to be the perfect fit for someone else's fantasy. You're here to become whole. And that journey doesn't start with being loved. It starts with standing alone. Jung called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your full self. Not the self you perform, not the self you manufacture to be accepted, but the man you were before the mask, before the validation, before the need to be admired, to weigh your core. And make no mistake, this path isn't romantic. It's not a transformation montage. It's brutal. It forces you to look inward and face the parts of yourself you've buried. The weak parts, the angry parts, the broken parts, the boy still begging to be chosen. And that's why most never start. Because solitude, real solitude, is terrifying. You begin to realize that your entire sense of worth was built on being reflected through someone else's eyes. And when that mirror disappears, so does the identity you thought was you. But here's the paradox Jung uncovered. The deeper you go into that silence, the more you begin to hear your own voice again. Not the one shaped by her love or society's rules, but the one you lost long ago. And when you find that voice, you no longer need to be seen. You see yourself. You no longer beg to be accepted. You walk knowing exactly who you are. That's the path, and no one can walk it for you. Not your friends, not a therapist, not the next woman, just you. And whatever you're still afraid to face in the dark. Something strange happens when you stop chasing who you think you need to be. You get quieter, sharper, more grounded. You stop over-explaining. You stop proving. You stop bending yourself into whatever shape keeps the peace. And the more you return to yourself, the more the world begins to treat you differently. Sometimes with respect, sometimes with discomfort, but always with attention. Jung didn't believe in becoming invincible. He believed in becoming whole. And that can only happen when a man confronts both his shadow and his anima, the two forces inside him that, left unchecked, keep him fragmented. The shadow is everything you've rejected about yourself, the anger you suppress, the jealousy you hide, the fear you deny. It's a part of you that explodes when you're pushed too far or collapses when you're not enough. Most men never meet it. They just react from it. But Jung taught that your shadow doesn't go away by ignoring it. It becomes your ally when you integrate it, when you stop fearing it and start learning from it. Then there's the anima, your internal feminine, the voice inside you that longs for connection, softness, creativity, emotional depth. If you don't make peace with her, you'll spend your life projecting her onto women, chasing them, needing them, resenting them when they don't meet the fantasy you've placed on them. But when you face both, something changes. You stop needing anyone to complete you. You stop looking for reflection in her eyes to feel like a man. You walk differently, speak differently. You become clear. And clarity, Jung said, is dangerous. Not because it harms others, but because it dissolves illusion. Women feel it. Some are drawn to it. Others are unsettled by it. But you no longer adjust yourself for the reaction. You're not ice. You're not stone. You're just whole. And that wholeness is what creates gravity. Not the mask, not the performance, just the presence of a man who no longer needs to be anything but himself. That's not alpha. That's not enlightened. That's simply a man who came home. When you stop performing, you start seeing. You begin to notice what used to be invisible, not just in yourself, but in others. You recognize projection in the way someone flatters you too quickly. You hear the unspoken script behind a compliment. You feel when someone's interest isn't rooted in who you are, but in what you symbolize. And so, when you finally meet her, the one who doesn't ask you to play a part, it feels unfamiliar, almost quiet. She doesn't try to rescue you. She doesn't expect you to rescue her. There's no emotional chaos wrapped in romance, no pressure to entertain, impress, or heal what she hasn't faced, because she's already been through it. She's met her own shadow, the part of her that blamed others for what she refused to confront. She's heard the voice of her animus, the internal masculine energy that once told her how things should be, who men ought to become, how love must look. And she questioned it, challenged it, sat with it long enough to stop letting it rule her life. And when a woman like that meets a man who has done the same, there is no seduction, only recognition. She doesn't project her savior onto you. She sees your flaws and respects them. She doesn't fall for your mystery. She values your clarity. She doesn't need you to carry her emotions because she already learned how to hold them herself. And you don't feel like you're trying to win her. You're not managing her perception of you. You're simply present, unguarded, honest, fully rooted in who you are. This is rare because most people are still living through their unconscious, still seeking to complete themselves through another, still addicted to the drama, the fantasy, the illusion of love. But when two people meet without masks, without scripts, without needing the other to make them whole, something real begins. And it's not fireworks. It's not obsession. It's peace. Not the peace of comfort, the peace of truth. This was never about her. That's the truth most men avoid until it's too late. You thought the pain came from being misunderstood, rejected, replaced, but that wasn't the real wound. The real wound was seeing just how far you were willing to bend, just to be accepted, how quickly you abandoned yourself for the hope of being seen. And now, standing at the end of it all, you realize she was never the answer. She was the mirror, a reflection of everything you hadn't yet faced within yourself, your emptiness, your need, your unlived potential. And when the fantasy collapsed, it wasn't her that fell apart. It was the version of you that only existed in her eyes. That version needed to die. Jung warned that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But the man who finally stops running, who sits in the discomfort long enough to meet himself, becomes something else entirely. Not superior, not above, just whole. And the world doesn't know what to do with that kind of man. You won't be admired by everyone. Some will call you distant, others arrogant, but that's only because you no longer play the game. You don't chase validation. You don't perform. You don't ask for permission to be yourself. You've stepped off the stage. You've burned the script. And now you write your own. And here's what's ironic. The moment you stop needing to be chosen is the moment people feel the weight of your presence more than ever. Because you're not a role. You're not a reaction. You're a man, rooted, responsible, real. And if something in you shifted, don't ignore it, like subscribe. This isn't just a message, it's a mirror. And the man you're meant to become is waiting on the other side. Not when she sees you, when you finally do.